Before I can give you an overview of Excel 2016, in other words, what you're looking at when you open up the program and going over the basics of the program, I need to open up Excel 2016. I can either do that by double-clicking on the shortcut that's on my desktop or with a single click on the shortcut that's on my taskbar. Now, if you want to add these shortcuts to your desktop or the taskbar like I have, then come over here and click on the Start button, click on All Programs, and it's sorted alphabetically, so find the E's, and there we go. There's Excel 2016. Give it a right click, and in the shortcut menu, you can select Pin to Taskbar. Well, mine says Unpin because currently it's right there. It's pinned to the taskbar, so if I want to remove it, then I'd select Unpin. Or if you want it as a shortcut on your desktop, then go down to Send To because you want to send it to over and up to the desktop as a shortcut. Let me click off. So to open up the Excel 2016 program, I have two options, either double click or single click. Let's go with the single click, and there you go. Every time you open up Excel 2016, you get the startup screen. In other words, in earlier versions of Excel, it took you right to a blank workbook. And I'll show you how you can disable the startup screen so it takes you right to the blank workbook in a later training video. But for right now, when you open it up, you have over to the left-hand side the most recent workbooks that I've been working on, which is like Import Contacts, Ghost Hunting. Ooh, sounds spooky. And you can see when I hover over it, below my pointer, there's a pop-up. And it tells you that this workbook is on the C drive under the user who logged in as training, and it's on the desktop, and then the name of the workbook. So when I click on it, it'll automatically open it up because it's on the desktop. That is, unless I moved it, and if I moved it when I click on it, it'll say it can't find it. In which case, I'll have to come down here and click on Open Up Other Workbooks to be able to search and find that workbook so I can work on it. But to keep it simple, let's go ahead and start with the blank workbook. Click on it, and there we go. Now to give you a basic overview of what you're looking at in Excel 2016, I'm going to start up at the top in the left-hand corner and go from left to right and then top to bottom. In the upper left-hand corner, you have what's called the Quick Access toolbar, and it's called that because you can quickly access any command on it in a single click. Like the first one, you can see when I hover over it, gives you the name of the command. It's called Save. And then if you don't want to click on it, you want to use shortcut keys. It's got those keys there, Control S. And I'll show you how you can customize this Quick Access toolbar in a later training video. Then over to the right in the middle, you have what's called the title bar. That's the title of the workbook. It gives you a generic name every time you create a new blank workbook. That is until you save it. And when you save it, you can name it to something more pertinent to what's going on in your workbook. Like if it's about sales charts or something like gummy bears, then go ahead and rename it. And then to the right of that, you have the name of the program that you currently have open. In case if you forgot, it's Excel. And then over to the right of that, you have the ribbon display options, which we'll cover later on. Then the window options, you can minimize this, restore it down, or close out of it completely. And then below that, you have this long strip that contains all these commands. It's called a ribbon. And on that ribbon, you have different tabs that helps organize those commands. So when you want to insert something, you go to the Insert tab, and you got all these different commands to work with. Now within each tab, let me go back to the Home tab, you have these commands that are separated then into groups. So you have these thin lines. I don't know if you can see them, they're kind of faded. But in between those thin lines, you have the name of the commands for that group or that belong to that group. Like when it comes to formatting the font, like if you want to make it bold, italics, underline, give it some color, change the font type, and so forth, look to the font group. And some of these groups have more commands than what meets the eye here. Then in the lower right-hand corner of some of these groups, you have a little arrow that points out, not styles, but like the font here. It's called the Expandable Dialog Box button because when you click on it, it expands open into a new window here, and there's the Font tab for the font group, and it has basically everything that you see here, plus some additional commands. So you've got the font type, the font size, there's the font type, the font size. But what you don't see here is like strike through or superscript, and you can see in the preview window what happens when you check these off or you change the font type or make it underline or change the color. Click Cancel. Now below the ribbon, you have here, on the left-hand side, what's called the name box. And the name box gives you the name of the cell that you currently are working in or you have selected. Now the cell down below is in the spreadsheet and only have one. You can add additional spreadsheets, but the spreadsheet is just basically a sheet that has a bunch of cells. Now these cells, when you want to work in them, you come down and you click on one, and notice that at the intersection of the cells, you're looking at these column labels up at the top that are alphabetical, and these row labels over the left-hand side that are numerical. So when I'm like, okay, what column, what row am I in? If you get really far out here, you have to look over here, then try to keep your eyes on here, and oh, well, it's shaded over there, so it ought to be fairly easy to identify. But even easier than that is the name box. You can see I'm in N20, column N, row 20. You can also come up in here, click in it, type in A2 and hit enter. Automatically takes you to that cell as well. So it identifies what cell you're in and also acts as a go-to box. Then over to the right, you have what's called the formula bar. So when you're working in a cell, and the cell is only A big, I mean you can stretch it, but if you want to keep the size small, whatever you have selected here, you can look up here and you can see it's pretty long, so it can display quite a bit. In fact, if you want to click on the expand arrow, you can see a lot more of the contents within that cell. So speaking of the cells down below, the two main purposes of the Excel workbook is to either perform calculations, functions, or formulas. So you can go ahead and do some simple mathematics like 2 plus 2 or more complex ones. And you can also use it as a database or a combination of both. So for example, as a database, if you type in like the label for this column, which would be first name, that would be last name, street address, phone number, and so on. Then below the first name column, you type in everybody's first name, and then everybody's last name, and so on. And then once you have a database that's organized correctly, which we'll talk about in later training videos, you'll be able to sort these and also filter and quickly get the information that you need out of that database. Now down below, out of the main working area, again, you've got your sheet 1. You can add additional sheets, and when you save it, whether you have 1 sheet, 2 sheets, or 3 sheets, when you save it, it's referred to as a workbook. Just think of it like a regular book. You flip through the page. I've never seen a book that has 1 page, but you can add more if you want. And in any case, you can also navigate between the sheets when you have tons of sheets to go through. You can also use the scroll bar to click and drag over to the right. Of course, it only goes over so far unless you want to click on the right arrow, and also up and down. And then below that, you have what's called the status bar. Right now, it tells me it's ready. The cell that I'm looking in is ready for me to enter in some data, or it'll show me that I'm in edit mode or anything else that I need to be aware of. You can also customize the status bar by right-clicking on it. And you can see right now that when I'm working with numbers, if I select a range of cells that has a bunch of numbers in it, it'll automatically give me the sum of that down below in the status bar. But it's not showing it right now because I don't have a range of cells with numbers in it to work with to select. And so if you don't want to see that when you're selecting cells that have numbers in it down below in the status bar, just deselect it so it removes the check, and then you won't see it. But I'm going to go ahead and check it and reselect it, click off. Then over to the right, you have your different views. You have the default view, which is the normal view. Then you've got page layout. You can hover over it and see the name of it pop up. Then also page break preview. And those views are also available, as it would make sense, on the view tab. Over in the workbook views, normal, page break, page layout, the more popular views. And it makes it nice because if you're on the home tab and you're working with a lot of commands here, you don't have to switch to the view tab with 1 click to 2 clicks. You can just come down here in a single click and change the view. And then you have the zoom feature if you want to click and drag over to the right to zoom in. Let me go over just a little bit. Whoa. You can really get close and up front and personable. Or you can click and drag and swing it all the way out and become more distant from your data. And if you're having a hard time with the slider here because you want to get to exactly 65, well that says 64, but when I click on it, I can come in here and say 65 and click Okie dokie. Or let me click on it and go back to 100% and click OK. And you'll see up here that column A has disappeared. Well, that's because I scrolled over too far. So if I want to go back to column A, then I've got to scroll over and then I can see it. Or hold down the control key on the keyboard and hit the home key. Control home takes you right to the first column and the first row. And the name of that cell is A1.